It's Ursula from ursula-smith.com, and today I'm starting a series on leather and trying to use different materials to impress designs into it. Um, kind of trying to emulate the tooled look and using my Big Shot, Sizzix Big Shot to roll things through with the leather and see what we can come up with. So today, the first thing I'm going to try is this is called a letterpress plate by Sizzix. I don't know if they sell them anymore. It's kind of like a half. It's like an embossing plate, not a folder. So it's just like half, but it's really thick and hard and plastic, and it's got the design popping out. So I am going to give this a shot. So thanks for joining me, and here comes the idea. Okay, I'm back, and I have had to redo a lot of my videos about leather, so hopefully these videos won't be super disjointed. I missed like a whole month's worth of shooting, so I've just got bits and pieces that I'm trying to cobble together. But in any event, so this is the first one in the series, and what I'm going to use today is a pre-made leather bracelet that you can find at like leather stores or Amazon, that sort of thing. Originally, I was planning on using this. It's called a letterpress plate. You can still find these kicking around, but they're pretty scarce, and it is basically kind of like a little bit thicker, but a half of an embossing folder. So I've decided that I'm going to use a pre-made bracelet with an embossing folder for this first video, just because I feel like that's more accessible to people. Going forward, I'll just use pieces of leather that I cut, and I'm using a Sizzix Big Shot to do all of this. So depending on what I'm embossing with, you'll see me use different combinations of the platform. But you're probably going to have to play around based on what you end up using. So I will also mention that as I've learned as I've been going along, and so now when I do my embossing, I tend to tape everything down so that it doesn't shift on me. You'll see in the videos in several cases where I don't tape anything down and things shift and move, and you either get a little bit of ghosting, and or like whole shifts of the design. So I don't really show that. I will talk about it in my blog posts. But that is something that I've learned as I've gone along, and I tend to do now. And I just use, I don't have any kicking around, but like the blue artist tape, so here's some, like this kind of stuff, painter's tape, pro mask, and again, you can get this any painting store, or Amazon, or Walmart. Like everybody sells that stuff, so it doesn't stick, and it just helps keep everything from moving around on you. But true to form, I'm not going to use that right now. So first thing that you have to do before you do anything with leather, and I probably should have done this first before I yapped for 5 minutes, but you have to spritz it with water, and it doesn't have to be soaking. And I probably, you know what? I have my craft sheet sitting here. So I'm just going to put this here and then show you what I do. So I just spritz the top of it and see how the water soaks right in. So I'm going to go over that again. And now it's a little more even. Maybe one more time. And basically, you kind of want to keep going until it takes a little bit of time for the water to soak in. And that's probably about all you need, especially if you're embossing with something that's hard and plastic, I've found. So this should be, and then I usually let it sit for a few minutes. While we're talking though, I may be able to, you know, it'll sit there for a few more minutes. So if you're going to go ahead and use an embossing plate or embossing folder, you've got two ways you can emboss. It's really hard to tell. So this is the innie. So the dots are kind of going in, and on the other side, the dots are going out. So if I use the dots going out on this example, the dots on the leather will be going in. And I think I would rather have it going the other way around. Now, the other thing I will mention is this is a very small embossing tool. I do have a bigger machine called an AccuCut, and it came with a plate that was used, this was eons ago. Let me see, I can quickly find it. So it looks like this. I don't know that they still sell it anymore, but it came, it was to use in the Grand Mark, which is the big machine. And they had embossing plates that you could use, which, oh, by the way, you can also use with leather. And this I tend to use with bigger things that I'm embossing with. So this may be a little bit of a challenge using the smaller machine. So my only point is, if you have the bigger machine, you can monkey around with different hard plates. Even if you don't have that embossing plate, you can still use this folder, you know, and maybe a couple of shims or not. So you kind of have to do a little bit of playing. So I'm going to try to use this embossing folder without breaking it apart. I really don't want to do that. So I'm going to see if I can line it up and if it will work. My light is in the way here. This way, without wrecking the folder itself. So the other thing is wherever you have, so normally I emboss with the embossing rubber and the embossing plate. And you'll see as I go through these series of videos that that is generally what I use. I think in this case, I again may try something else where I use a smaller plate on top, and so I can try to avoid getting ridges where these ends are. So I'll talk about that in other videos, and you'll see there's a couple of times where you know, I get those edges in there. If you're using straight leather, that's generally not a problem because you're going to cut the ends off anyway to size for a wrist, and then, you know, before you put your snaps on, that sort of thing. But in this case where it's already pre-done, I really kind of want to try to avoid pressing in these ends here. So I'm going to go find a smaller cutting plate and I will be back. Okay, so I am back, and this is, again, made for my AccuCut machine. It's basically the same thickness, maybe a little bit less, so I might need a couple more shims. Yeah, so maybe it's a little bit less than the embossing plate, but I want to give it a shot so that I can try to avoid those ridges. I'm trying to see visually where that design is. So this may be a little bit tricky. So again, if you don't mind cutting up your folder, probably not a big deal. I could also try it with the whole thing in the folder. Maybe that's the way I want to try it. But now see, with that, it's really not going to go all the way to the ends. So this may be the easier way to do it, but I'm going to go for the hard way. So I'm going to try and line this up. And again, probably should be taping this down. So maybe something like that. You know what? I'm going to move this down a little bit more. And then I'm going to line this up with the dots that I want. And then this with the edge of the rubber. And then we'll see if I have the sandwich correct. So you basically, and again, no, it's too easy. So just like with paper, when you're embossing paper, you might need shims. And so I'm going to grab a bunch of pieces of paper that I use for shims. And I'm going to add these on top. I feel like I might need a few more of those. And that's still super easy. So again, if you start getting into tons of pieces of paper, I probably would go up with a tab first, but since this is already set, I'm just gonna go for it. It's still super easy. So I'm thinking this is not enough. Try one more piece of paper. And that was a little bit tighter. Sorry about this. The letterpress is a lot thicker, and so I had it set up initially for that. So I didn't need those tabs for the letterpress, but the folder is a lot thinner. So we'll see. Let's be very careful on doing this, and maybe we can recover if we need to. Sweet. Okay. So this end of things, I think that's part of the design. I don't know if you can see the design. There's like spaces where there's no holes. So that's part of the design, but I gotta say I don't totally love that. I don't know if I can Mickey Mouse it, where I put the plate back on and then just cover this part of it, and maybe I will try that in a few minutes. But in any event, the single embossing folder really embossed really well. You can see the design. Made a little bit trickier because of we had the snaps in the way. And so, you know, if you really get into this idea, you may want to start trying to invest in some tools so you can cut the leather yourself, add the snaps yourself. It's not super tricky. So, you know, again, if you're going to kind of get into this, if it's just a one-off, then buy a bag of these and, you know, have a couple of extra for fiddling around when you're starting out. But I would say that embossing folders are definitely working. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to use the other tab, and I'm going to try and see if I can set this up again to just get a little bit more of the dots at this other end. I will be back. So I am back, and so here's a bunch of pieces that I've cut from, this was from a bigger piece. They sell those platforms or plates in lots of different sizes. So they're wonky, they're cut wonky, but metal shears cut them great. And so this is going to be a little bit too big. Thinking this one, maybe not. So this one actually may be the way to go. So I think I'm going to use this one, because this one, that one might work too. That starts to bleed in to the design, but I think that one still might work. So let's go with that. And so again, we're gonna have to, I'm gonna try and move this a little bit, because we still need the embossing rubber over the whole thing. So I'm going to line up the embossing rubber with the design. And then I just moved it. See, this is why you need the tape. So, oh, it's hitting my light. That's why. Okay, sorry. Fiddly alert. Okay. So I'm going to try and line the embossing rubber up with the design, again, without moving it. And then line the plate up with hopefully this is enough. I still may need a shim. Yep, I need a shim. Okay, that's a drag. All right, so the whole thing has to come back out. Oh, this is a lot longer than I thought this was going to be. I thought this was going to be the easy one to redo. Sorry. Just hit the camera. Now it's shaking. All right, I feel like I moved that. All right, you know what? I'm going to do the shims on the bottom. Probably don't need as many because I have the tab down. I want to show you this whole thing so you can see it and know that you can do it too. So like I said, it's a little fiddly. And I'm hoping this leather hasn't dried, because that's going to be our other issue. Oh, moved it. I should just tape this. Stop fooling around. Still needs a little more, I think. Nope. Worked. Nice. Okay. So that is what we're left with. So no ridge, just a hint of one over here. Could be a little bit more careful next time, but you know, all the dots are there. It's kind of even on both sides. So it was a long video. You got to see me work with some fiddly things, but it definitely is doable. So if you want to dip your toe in leather embossing, buying the pre-made leather bracelets, although it was a little fiddly because of the embossing folder deal, you know, unless you want to go out and buy a whole slew. I mean, again, you can get away with just the leather, the snaps, and and like a rotary tool, if, you know, and you wouldn't have to worry about these things in your way and matching things up. Because if you had a piece of leather, you could just, you know, emboss along the length of the leather, you know, and then cut it down. So, but if you just want to dip your toes in it, it is doable. It's just a little fiddly. So thanks for joining me. And I'm going to be playing around with other ideas for embossing leather. I've shot, well, I shot the whole series, lost part of it, but I still have other bits and pieces, so I will be putting those together in the near future. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.